Welcome to the webinar series on COVID-19 and novel infectious diseases, hosted by the Policy Research at Hong Kong IAPS at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. The outbreak of COVID-19 is drawing tremendous global and local public attention, not only to medical and epidemiological research, but also to interdisciplinary research in behavioral and social science that can inform policies and business practices. The fallout caused by this pandemic and future novel infectious diseases will bring continuing global challenges. More up-to-date academic research grounded on empirical scientific evidence is badly needed for public policy reference. The CUHK Policy Research at Hong Kong IAPS program was established to promote cross-boundary and interdisciplinary collaboration on policy research. We are pleased to present a series of webinars to share the works of our researchers across different faculties on issues related to the pandemic with implications on policy decisions. Our webinar today is on corporate social responsibility during COVID-19 pandemic. Our main speaker is Professor Sora Kim, Associate Professor at the School of Journalism and Communications at CUHK. She hopes to share her experience and research in the US and China and looks forward to exploring the following questions with you. During the COVID-19 pandemic, how does public knowledge of the CSR donations of celebrity corporate figures enhance the reputation of the country of origin of these corporate figures? How do the CSR donations of corporate figures affect the public's perception of the altruistic and quote-unquote selfish motives behind such donations? Are there cross-cultural differences in the perceptions? Professor Sora Kim received her PhD from the University of Tennessee. Her research focuses on corporate communications, CSR communication, and crisis communication. She has published 105 publications, including 50 refereed international journal articles. She received Best Paper Award in Communication Policy and Technology section of the International Association for Media and Communication Research 2019, jointly with the academic journal Internet Policy Review. Please welcome Professor Kim to this webinar. Professor Kim, please.
Okay, thanks for the great introduction, Professor Cheung, and thanks to Hong Kong Institute of Asia Pacific Studies at CUHK for organizing this webinar. I'm glad to share my recent research findings. Today's talk will be about corporate figure CSR donations during COVID-19 pandemic and their reputational benefits. And the study is specifically focused on Bill Gates and Jack Ma and their CSR donations and how such CSR donations can affect different levels of reputation, including their own reputation, their affiliated companies' reputations, and in turn, their home country's reputation. Okay, so as you can see in this figure, as of February 21st, 2021, not 2020, 2021, this year, there have been more than 100 million confirmed COVID-19 cases. And it is still growing every day. I don't have to repeat the history of this pandemic as we all have gone through this difficult time. Although more than a year passed, we still cannot have our normal lives. In Hong Kong, more than 2 people cannot gather together, and people cannot dine at a restaurant for dinner after 6. And in Seoul, Korea, where I am right now for my sabbatical, people can only stay at restaurants or pubs until 10 p.m. And more than 5 people cannot gather together here either. In California, as far as I know, most of the park remained under lockdown until January 25th this year. So despite these disruptions to economic and social activities, the global pandemic has also given us a tremendous opportunities to those, especially to those who have a vision of a fulfilling broader social needs and also addressing urgent global challenges. So using this pandemic as an opportunities, many corporate figures and companies have contributed to the fight against this pandemic by donating money and medical products and equipment to help ward off the virus. This figure shows the world top coronavirus financial donors around the time of April 2020 last year. As you can see, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey ranked the top. He pledged to give $1 billion to the cause, followed by Google and ByteDance and MasterCard and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Alibaba Group ranked 12th on the list. But this list doesn't include Jack Ma's shipment of vital supplies, which some countries might consider to be more important than money, especially at the early stages of a global pandemic. So Jack Ma's medical supplies donation were not counted in this figure. So among these private donors, I particularly chose Bill Gates and Jack Ma because these two are highly affiliated with their companies, Microsoft versus Alibaba, and they're considered to be symbolic figures, and both are icons of the companies and no longer works at the company anymore. But both are also at the same time leading philanthropic nonprofit organizations. So they provide great opportunities to see how their actions are related to their affiliated company's reputation and home country's reputation. So let's look at more specifically Bill Gates, for example. Last year, March 2020, he donated $50 million to help countries hit hardest by the virus. And also Jack Ma shipped the medical supplies to more than 150 countries, including Africa, Asia, Europe, and even politically sensitive areas, including Iran and Iraq and even the US. So such voluntary and proactive CSR donations have attracted extensive news coverage and public attention worldwide. Okay, so these two can provide a proper context to study multi-level reputational relationships. And another reason why I particularly chose these two are because of their country of origin. Okay? There has been a tension between the US and China for years, and especially during this pandemic, there have been many various conspiracy theories related to US and China, like either US or Chinese military created the virus. So it would be interesting to look at whether CSR knowledge of Bill Gates or Jack Ma can have a positive impact on their home country's reputation, especially among consumers in countries that have a very much contentious relationship with the origin country. So I raised the specific research inquiries. So given the context, the question is basically whether proactive CSR donation of corporate figures can bring about reputational benefits, even among consumers in countries that have a contentious relationship. Okay. So both figures are considered to be exemplars of transformational leaders, Bill Gates and Jack Ma. And they both share similar personality characteristics, which is down to earth. And Gates is co-founder of Microsoft and currently working as a philanthropist with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Ma is also a founder of Alibaba Group, and he's also currently working as a philanthropist with the Jack Ma Foundation. And both, as of, in March 2020, both donated money and testing kits and face masks to aid in the containment of the global outbreak. Okay, so according to previous research, transformational leaders like these two tend to guide their companies to commit more to CSR practice. In this regard, characteristics and reputation of these corporate figures are inevitably associated with a corporate reputation. Okay. In addition to that, the study used the inverse country of origin framework. The original country of origin framework focuses on halo effect of country of origin. The halo effect indicates people use a given country's reputation to make inferences about product qualities of that country's companies. So in that case, the origin country's reputation serves as very much extrinsic cues for outside observers to evaluate the country's companies and also the company's products. That is why developed countries enjoy better reputation than their developing countries' counterpart. So it is basically due to the spillover effect of country reputation to corporate reputation. So US products could be considered to be more reliable than Chinese product because of this country of origin effect. This is the original COO framework related to halo effect. However, the relationship between corporate reputation and country reputation is not simply unidirectional. It is reciprocal and dynamic and change over time through a two-way interaction. So based on this perspective, the study uses the inverse country of origin framework. Okay, this inverse country of origin framework focuses on summary effect. Summary effect assumes that an origin country's reputation can be also built from public's experience and assessments about companies and their products from the origin country. So reputation, basically the perspective that this study had was that reputation is multidimensional and corporate figures' reputation can add value to their companies, and their company's reputation can also have a value as an intangible asset for countries. So based on the leadership impact and the inverse country of origin effect discussed earlier, the study basically proposed this. Okay, these are the proposed theoretical framework. So basically, the knowing corporate figures' CSR actions will have an impact on their own reputation and the company reputation, in turn, country reputation. In this mediated, multi-level reputational mechanism, I also propose to perceive the CSR motives, like how people perceive their actions, what kind of motives their actions have. Okay, so depending on those perceived CSR motives, the mechanism would be spillover effect of CSR knowledge on country reputation could be different. So there are two types of CSR motives. One is public serving motives and the other is firm serving motives. Public serving motives basically indicates people think that a person's CSR actions to be serving public interest and also to have a very much altruistic motives. And on the other hand, firm serving motives, people tend to think the reason why they're doing CSR action is to serve their own or serve the company's interest. So in that case, self-serving or firm-serving motives. There are two types of CSR motives. According to the previous knowledge, previous research, when public attribute high level of public serving or altruistic motives and low level of firm serving or self-serving motives, the effectiveness of CSR actions tend to be much greater, enhancing much more favorable reputation, like a corporate reputation. So this study proposed the positive spillover effect of CSR knowledge of corporate figure CSR actions on multi-level reputations will be increasing as attribution of altruistic or public serving motives increase and also decrease as attribution of self-serving motives increase. Okay, so the proposed theoretical framework is perceived CSR motives, public serving versus self-serving, will function as a moderator, but the direction would be different. That's what I proposed. And then the method for testing proposed relationship, I used online surveys, and data were collected in May last year during the early peak of a global pandemic, and then used the MTurk and CREDEMO. And participants, especially for Americans who never heard of Jack Ma and Chinese who never heard of Bill Gates, were filtered. And among 70% of Americans who access to the survey have heard of Jack Ma, and almost all Chinese actually heard of Bill Gates. So let's look at some of the descriptive findings. As you can see here, Chinese tended to rate much higher CSR knowledge, which means CSR knowledge of Bill Gates. And also they tended to rate much higher corporate figures reputation, also corporate reputation. And they also tended to rate much higher altruistic, public serving motives to the action than American counterparts. But Americans tended to rate much higher self-serving motives to the action, CSR actions, and also higher country reputation than Chinese counterparts. That means Americans tended to rate much higher Chinese reputation than Chinese rated US reputation. Okay, this the entire tendency is evident for all reputations, both Bill Gates, Microsoft, Jack Ma, and Alibaba. That is, even for Bill Gates' reputations and Microsoft reputations, Chinese rated much higher reputations than Americans. Okay. So let's look at the basic findings. As you can see in this figure, CSR knowledge of corporate figures donation improved corporate figures reputation, in turn their affiliated companies reputation, and in turn a country's reputation in both sample, US and then China. And so CSR knowledge of corporate figures donation can significantly improve here country reputation, home country's reputation, through increasing their own personal reputation and affiliated reputation. So this spillover effect of CSR knowledge on multi-level reputation was basically consistently evident across the two countries. But the differences between the two countries emerged when the spillover effect was considered through only Ma's reputation or Gates' reputation alone, corporate figures' reputation alone. For Americans, the positive spillover effect to country reputation vanished. As you can see, it became dotted line. So when the impact go through corporate figures reputation alone, it became insignificant. So it vanished. So there's no positive impact. But for Chinese, it turned negative, which means there is a negative impact when it's only going through Bill Gates' reputation alone. So it is possible that the positive reputation of corporate figures, which is strengthened by CSR knowledge, may trigger strong mental contrast between corporate figures' actions and their home countries. For example, Chinese participants may have perceived that Bill Gates did good in helping fight the virus, but that mental contrast basically contrasted that with the US government doing nothing for it. So because of that, it became negative for Chinese, and for Americans, it became insignificant. So this implies that for a country to reap the reputational benefits of CSR, consumers have to strongly associate corporate figure CSR action with affiliated companies' reputation. Then through the inverse COO impact, the summary effect, based on their assessment about the company, the corporate reputation can impact the country's reputation. So when mediated by corporate figures' reputation alone, without activating the assessment of the affiliated companies, the spillover effect may either disappear or turn negative. Okay. However, it is important to note that despite people drawing mentor strong negative contrast between corporate figures activities and those of the origin countries, the positive spillover impact on country reputation was the largest when mediated by both reputation of corporate figures and the reputation of companies in both countries. Okay. So I'm just in summary, differences lies when the ripple effect was considered only going through corporate figures reputation. For Americans, the ripple effect positive spillover effect vanished. For Chinese, it turned negative. So it is possible to say people may trigger, may contrast, strong mental contrast, create strong mental contrast between the corporate figures' actions and their home countries. Okay. So let's look at the altruistic CSR motives, how altruistic CSR motives function in the ripple effect mechanism. As you can see in this figure, a positive spillover effect of CSR knowledge onto country reputation was significantly moderated by altruistic motives in the US. However, it was not the case. In the US case, as people attributed more altruistic CSR motives to Jack Ma's CSR donation, reputational benefit tended to increase in all levelable reputation, like Jack Ma's and Alibaba's and China reputation. But for China's case, regardless of how people attribute altruistic public serving motives to the action or not, like high or low, the reputational benefits of CSR knowledge onto country reputation mediated by these two reputation did not change much. Okay, so more specifically, as you can see, for the US sample, among people who knows little about Jack Ma's CSR donations, there was not much differences in Jack Ma's reputation, as you can see. But among people who, as people know more about, like among people know well about Jack Ma's CSR donation, those who attributed high altruistic motives revealed much higher corporate figures reputation than low. But for Chinese, regardless of the CSR knowledge level, there's no differences, okay, consistent. So in summary, varying patterns found between the two countries. For Americans, the positive spillover effect was actually increasing as altruistic motive attribution increasing. But for Chinese, the spillover effect did not change much by altruistic motives, remaining persistently positive regardless. Then let's look at the self-serving motives, how it functions in the multi-level reputation relationship. For Americans, as you can see, when they have a little knowledge about corporate figure CSR donations, those who attributed very low self-serving tended to rate much better Jack Ma reputation than high. However, as people learn more about the corporate figures CSR donation, the originally negative impact of self-serving motives turn to a positive one, meaning that people with high self-serving motive attribution tended to rate much higher Ma's reputation. For Chinese though, as the CSR knowledge increased, the negative impact merely diminished rather than turning into positive one, as you can see here. And more specifically, the moderation role of self-serving in this case, in both sample, the ripple effect of CSR knowledge increased as people attributed more self-serving motives to the CSR action in both countries. So both are significantly positive and positive way. Okay, so as you can see in this table, positive spillover effect of CSR knowledge on multi-level reputation increased as altruistic motive increased in the US, but not necessarily in China because it's not significant moderated mediation. But interestingly, positive ripple effect, positive spillover effect of CSR knowledge on country reputation increased as people attributed more self-serving motives to the CSR action in both countries. Both are significant, and the impact size, the spillover effect impact size increased, significantly increased as self-serving motives increased. Okay, so in summary, for Americans, the originally negative self-serving motives turning into a positive one, meaning as people know more about corporate figure CSR actions, the people who attribute high self-serving motives tended to rate much higher multi-level reputation. For Chinese, though, the negative impact merely diminished rather than turning into a positive one. Okay, so these differences can be explained by the level of differences in terms of consumers' acceptance of corporate figures or companies' pursuit of self-interest. And this can be explained by institutional theory. And in fact, in our sample, Americans in our sample attributed much higher self-serving motives and much lower altruistic motives to the COVID-19 related donation than Chinese counterparts. Okay. So according to institutional theory, public expectation toward the business sectors are largely affected by institutional development, and consumers in more developed countries tend to hold much higher expectation. And this leads to more frequent violation of public expectation, and also greater consumer skepticism, and also more reputational penalty against the business sectors. And in addition, people from more developed countries tend to accept self-serving CSR motives more than those from less developed countries. It's because they tend to view company CSR activities as being both strategy-driven, which means to serve a firm's strategic goal, at the same time value-driven for serving public serving purposes, than compared to the people from less developed countries. So, and also our study found, basically suggested, people's willingness to accept self-serving motives can be increasing as consumers know more about a person's CSR actions. And basically our study found this tendency was, although this tendency was more silent among Americans, but the same tendency existed among Chinese even. Okay, based on these findings, there are some of the implications. First, the study extends the very much importance of CSR knowledge in terms of achieving reputational benefits in multi-level. So basically, the study found Jack Ma's CSR donation can help improve China's reputation among Americans, and Bill Gates' CSR donations can also help improve US reputation among Chinese. Okay, so this spillover effect happens through improving their own personal reputation and the company reputation, and in turn, their home country reputation. Okay, so while prior research investigated how CSR knowledge can impact on various outcomes, but especially usually in a single company context or single country context. However, this study provided the role of CSR knowledge is in a cross-national and proactive CSR context, especially in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. And also the second, our findings underscores the notion that such spillover effect can happen even among consumers from countries that have very much contentious relationship with the country of origin. Okay, and this provides some of the diplomacy implication. Perhaps the government should be more proactive about encouraging the business sector's CSR commitment to improve better the foreign relations. By doing what? By providing supportive policies like tax benefits or exemptions to companies who do the CSR activities that could contribute social welfare and sustainable development, the government can encourage corporate sectors to more actively participate in CSR activities. And private sectors also should acknowledge the importance of CSR actions, especially amid a pandemic, because both can benefit by building a good private-public relationship. Okay, because improved corporate reputation through CSR activities can benefit the origin country's reputation in a global context. So improving foreign consumers' positive perception toward the country, which benefits the public sector. In turn, improved national reputation can benefit companies in global context through a halo effect on foreign consumers' perception of the country of origins companies. Okay, and according to our findings, consumers' willingness to accept corporate figures' self-serving motives differs by country and especially institutional development. Okay, as we find the pattern how self-serving motives works different between the US and China. Okay, so willingness to accept self-serving motive is greater in the US than in China. But the more important thing is, as consumers, CSR knowledge about corporate actions or CSR actions increases, such willingness to accept self-serving motives can also drastically increase across the country. So this means further enhancing the positive spillover effect of CSR knowledge onto all multi-level reputations. Okay, so based on this one, practical implication arise. Practitioners should pay more attention to creative way to improve CSR knowledge rather than worrying too much about what if people attribute self-serving motives to our actions. Because if you increase CSR knowledge among consumers, even if people attribute more self-serving motives, still there's a positive spillover effect can increase. Okay? So proactive CSR in a global pandemic could be a good destination, not just for the purpose of positive social impacts, but also for ensuring reputational benefits for both corporations and countries. I think this is my last slide. Thank you. And thank you so much for listening to my talk.